I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Recommendation here that the agenda be approved as presented. Someone to move the motion, please. Moved by Councillor Coburn, second by Councillor Pringle. All in favor? It is carried. Moving on for agenda, declaration of interest. You can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. Presentation. We have a presentation here this afternoon from Trent Jarvis from the Lumax Group on the Waterford International Airport. And I'm going to turn it forward to Trent. Welcome, Trent.
Thank you, Richard. Just before I get started, I'd like to introduce my team with me here today. We have Lisa Davidson, who's our Director of Airport for Lumax Group, and Zach Renee, who's currently your manager at Waterton Airport. So I'd just like to spend a few minutes going through a presentation here to talk about the Waterton Airport, and I know everybody's familiar with it, but I'd like you to look at it a different lens from an opportunity perspective. And I know there's some decisions that Council is wanting to make on the future of the airport, so what we'd like to do today is give you some perspective on, this is your asset, here's the opportunity, here's the opportunities that other airports have taken to really make sure they realize that the airport is a strong, important economic driver for the region. And the other part of it is looking at what other airports similar to yours have been through to make sure that they are sustainable, that they are really offering something back to the community other than just being a drain on taxpayers' dollars. So that's kind of what my presentation is about today. And for those
may I ask, do you refer to us through your complete presentation and have questions after or during?
I'll take them either, so we can take them during if anybody has them, for sure. If it's like me, I'd probably forget by the end. Just a bit quickly about the Lumax Group. We have 3 divisions within our company, which is infrastructure and asset management, aviation and aerospace, and education and compliance. So currently we work for airports across Canada. We manage 7. We have compliance contracts with a few others, and currently offer services like this to about 25 to 35 airports at any given time throughout the year. So just we're going to talk a bit about the airport as mentioned today, and I'd like you, this is kind of a great view of the airport, and as we work through it, we'd like to show you what some of the opportunities are with the asset that you have in place. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about Waterton. I know you're quite familiar with the airport, but we want to look at it from a little bit of a different lens. Why Waterton? So why is it important to think about your airport as that asset? And the build it and they will come, you've heard it before, it's a big risk for some, but I'd like to show you some examples of other airports that through good strategic planning have been able to position themselves in the aviation world as being an airport of choice to invest in and to build at. We're going to look at other similar airport examples that I mentioned, that other successes, and we're going to look at also the benefits of thinking about your airport as a regional model, so regionalization of your airport. So what are the advantages to Georgian Bluffs and to the region? So how can looking at that regional model be an asset? And then of course, again, throughout it, we can certainly ask questions. So one of the biggest assets of your airport is it's the only certified airport in the Grey Bruce counties. So there is a number of airports that are all non-certified. So one of the advantages of Waterton is you are certified. So what's that mean? Several things, that when companies are looking at investing at airports, when they hear the word certified, it means that your airport is maintaining a standard that it's a worldwide standard, not just a Canadian standard, that they know that flying in your airport, it's almost like that guaranteed stamp that it's safe. So there's companies that won't fly into your airport unless it's certified. Their insurance company stipulates that it must be certified. So The certification, if you lose it, it's very difficult to get back. So you have it, so that's an incredible asset for your airport. Your primary runway, so 5,000 feet. So 5,000 foot runway, and there's a secondary runway that can be brought up to speed and reopened is a good crosswind. But having that 5,000 foot runway is critical for getting the aircraft that you see coming into your airport in and out. And it does have the ability to expand that to up to 7,500 feet. And we'll talk about that later on. It's a 5,000 foot runway with the appropriate width as well. Canada Customs Airport of Entry, seasonal, that tourism is no surprise, is a big part of your business here. And also we need to think about business. So through our experience with other airports, and you see it in Wyerton, if somebody's looking to invest in your community, so forget about the airport, but they want to look at building a manufacturing facility or somebody with tourism or whatever, the days of spending a week to go look at something are over for a lot of business people. You want to be able to fly in, look at the region, look at the real estate, or look at the business that they're operating and get in their airplane and leave. So having customs is important. Having the size of runway is important that you have, which is the largest in the area. It's open 24 hours a day and every year throughout the year, so it doesn't have to be staffed at night, but you still have the pilots still have the ability to fly in. So everything from medevacs to, again, some of that business travel is important. Host of Nav Canada's backup navigation equipment for Central Ontario. So again, another big asset for the airport to have that equipment as well. So 38 medevac flights was in 2019. So I think it's important to point out here, and when you're thinking about regionalization, that although we don't know, we can't get the data for privacy reasons on, where did these 38 people come from, where they reside. We know that it's quite likely that it's across the region and not just Georgian Bluffs. So when you think about pushing for a regional model, it's not just Georgian Bluffs residents that are getting those medevacs in. So we know that the medevacs is an important piece of having an airport for life safety reasons. The 24-hour human weather observation on site. There's very few airports left in Ontario and in Canada, for that matter, that actually has that human weather observation, which is some of the best data in the world is when you have eyes on the ground to be able to help with that. 820 acres of land, so just 2 kilometers outside of Wyerton. So 820 acres for possible future development. And I see I have a question. You want to?
I cannot see Kathy.
Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Sorry, I was a little late there. I apologize. Just going back a slide to the medevac flights. 38 medevac flights in 2019. Do you know how many of those were rotary versus fixed wing?
Is that?
I don't have that number with me right now, but I can provide it after.
We'll get to that number for sure moving forward. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So the 820 acres. So we think about looking at, what are the other options for airports? Airports are looking at every opportunity for development on the airport. So usually when we do master plans and we do strategic planning, we start looking at what are all the other things that could complement the aviation side of it, and look at what aviation companies can move in and utilize some of this land. So it's an incredible to have that kind of acreage on your airport for future development. The other thing is the 2 runways that we talked about, the one that can be brought up to speed. Primary runway boasts a variety of IFR approaches. So you're one of the few airports of this size that can say that they have the approaches that you do. It's incredible amount of work to get to that point where your minimums are 250 feet. Most of them are 550 feet. So, which means when you're attracting business to your airport, there's a lot of bad weather days of being able to get into your airport or out of your airport, where many airports don't have that luxury. So, your approaches are in incredibly great shape. The Pullman Terminal building, again, you guys would know all this, but your terminal building is in great condition. It does have the facilities in there. It does have room for expansion if there's businesses coming in and need that space, that's available. If you look at in 2019, 90% of the charter flights were from the U.S. So what's that telling us when we start to see those numbers? That if you're grabbing that many flights in the U.S., then what are we missing out on that could come here as opposed to flying to Pearson or some of the airports in the GTA or the Southern Ontario Airport network? So that's something that we need to grab onto and look at how we can actually enhance that service moving forward. Major on-site tenants, so we have the Coast Guard, NAV Canada, Bayside Aero, so you have a good client base, tenant base already on site. And what we do know from development at other airports that we work with, that supply chain and being with like-minded companies in the aviation world is very important. So the more business we could attract to the airport, the better it'll be for attracting more of like-minded businesses. The on-site restaurant, and you think, why is that important? Well, because when they're a lot of the general aviation world, they want to come where there's a place a destination to go. So whether it's they're coming to for Saturday breakfast and they eat in the restaurant, but they're also buying fuel while they're there, or they may decide to come for a weekend and have some of these assets at their fingertips. So some of that's very important for the overall sustainability of an airport. Just scoot through that one. I want to talk about the economic impacts, although this is a bit out of date, but from 2016, that the output of the GDP, you're looking at those numbers on the bottom, and $2.3 million was your total. And you can look at that and say, well, what's the benefit of that? Well, if you close your airport, then there's a good chance $2.3 million will leave your area and go to another airport in the region, or possibly not even to Grey Bruce County. So this number needs to be updated to truly reflect what it is in today's world, but that's important to consider when you're making decisions around the airport, what the GDP is. So why Wiarton? So if we look at from an aeronautical distance mapping, so this map actually shows you the distance from other destinations. So we took a 500-kilometer radius, and you look at where the airport is. So anybody flying in, so people are looking at developing, they're looking at tourism, they're looking at where they want to establish businesses and whatnot. So if you look at a 500-kilometer radius, and that goes well into the states, into Columbus, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, up to the north as far as Timmins. So the catchment area that this airport has the ability to attract business from an aeronautical perspective is you're positioned very well for that. The next map that I wanted to show you was if you look at so this so what we did is we took a look at the 100-kilometer radius by vehicle. So if we were able to establish a really good, reliable scheduled service to Toronto, for instance, we look at how far would you drive before it becomes not worthwhile. You also drive to Toronto. So would you drive an hour and a half to be able to fly 20 minutes or 40 minutes to be in Toronto? So if you look at the catchment area around that you can grab a great population. So when we're out looking at trying to attract scheduled service, then this is what the carriers need to know. How many people live in that catchment area that's within an hour and a half of the airport? And that becomes very attractive to airlines when they see what that big catchment area is. So that would be work we'd recommend. That I know you've had Fly GTA here, and to look for a reliable service like that, there needs to be a lot of work completed to conduct a study to see how many people would use the service. So that would be a catchment area that would be considered. We talked about the developable land, so 300 acres out of the 800. So there's two ways of looking at it. A lot of airports are looking at that land they can't develop for commercial use. There's a lot of high-paying yield crops that airports are looking at now that won't interfere with air operations, and there's a lot of other projects that airports are looking at to maximize that potential. But 300 acres, which is significant, that are developable for aviation and aerospace use. We talked about this already, but the longest and widest runway in Grey and Bruce County, ability to handle large corporate military jets. So at 5,000 feet, you can land a 737. The airport's rated for that, which is important. 737 or an Airbus 320. So they can right now land and put a partial load on it to get out. So why could that be important? Through charter travel services. So they land in Wyerton, fill a 737, and go to another airport to pick up the rest of the passengers. And we see this in Peterborough. We'll talk about that program, which one company was already looking at doing. But imagine if you expand to 7,000 feet or 7,500 feet. Now that because the 737s and the military aircraft, so we look at what are the abilities of that. I'm not suggesting doing that tonight. It all determine where you want to go with the airport, but if it's required, you have the ability to do that. A recovery airport by NAV Canada, so because of the significant infrastructure being a certified airport for many reasons, your airport could be a recovery airport if needed from some of the big ones. Frequently used by DND and the Coast Guard and OPP and other emergency service providers. So, again, why is that important? So when the military use your airport, they can and do it sometimes come in and buy significant amounts of fuel. And when they buy that, it's not just 80 liters, it's, it could be, 5,000 pounds of fuel, for instance. So, and the other part of this is that you're surrounded by water. So the amount of search and rescue work that could be done in your area by the OPP or the Coast Guard is pretty significant. So the airport is a provider of that service. So we look at, again, we're just on that theme of the developable land. It's not too often you see an airport like Wyerton where, yes, you've had some issues with trees that's being taken care of, but when you look at how much room is on the airport that is clean, developable land, that you have protection on the approaches, so somebody's not going to build silos, or put in, wind turbines right off the approach of the airport when you pretty much own a good chunk of those approaches. That's pretty valuable. Three-phase power. So when you're talking about aerospace manufacturers and MROs and aircraft mechanics, and having that power is pretty significant. And I think what you're going to see with COVID is the aerospace industry is taking a pretty big hit, like many others. And some of these companies are going to be looking at recovery and what that looks like. So to come to somebody like an airport like Wyerton, when the cost of doing business is quite a bit cheaper than being in the GTA, for instance, some of this stuff is really important. So having the municipal water, having the sewer services, having gas, having fiber, all the things that are important to any business moving into the area, your airport is well situated. We've talked a little bit about the navigation aids, so I won't get stuck on this, but it's such an asset for Wyerton. I just mentioned it a little bit, but the PLR rating, so that's the point load rating, so that's when, for instance, when a 737 is going to touch down on your runway, so the landing gear hits your runway, does it have the strength to sustain that aircraft landing, or a military Hercules, any of those sort of aircraft. And again, out of all the airports in your area, you've got the best payment load rating of any airport. So another great asset for your airport. And I've talked about the type of aircraft already that can land. Competitive airport landing and parking fees. So I know that the airport traditionally checks those and to make sure that you're competitive with also the price of fuel. So having those competitive rates, again, it's the difference of somebody coming here, or do they land in Toronto, for instance, if they're a business jet and drive here. So the no landing fees for the private aircraft. So again, they're buying fuel and you make your money off the fuel far more than landing fees. The noise no noise restrictions or night curfews. So again, another pilot training. We've heard in the past that pilot training is such a shortage that you have a great airport to be able to attract those great flight schools. And yes, there's not a lot of flying going on right now, but it will bounce back, and now is the time to plan for when it does, and then pilots will meet again. So I've talked a bit about the expansion. So there is the ability to expand the main runway. There's also the ability to pave your crosswind runway, which for any pilot training, again, attracting business to the airport, a crosswind runway is important as well. We just showed you just a couple of quick pictures here of what the expansion could look like. And again, I'm not here to sell expansion today. I'm saying that, you know, your airport is so situated for growth if it's planned correctly. So you see everything in blue is an extended runway, and as well as a full-length taxiway, which becomes a safety issue. And to the right in blue is another big development area that could be an MRO, a maintenance repair facility, manufacturer, aircraft manufacturer, mechanics, any of that area. And then you have the area in red as well, which is very developable. So well situated for growth. This just shows an aerial shot of when I speak about the clean approaches and land adjacent to the runways and aprons that is available and very clean for that development. So what we didn't do a complete study, but what we did do is take a look at. We're big proponents of don't promise the world if you can't deliver, and so we really took a look at what are the benefits, what are the things that Wiarton International Airport should concentrate on as opposed to not. And the first one's being the economic development, the jobs. So we feel that what's going on in the aviation world and the airport as an asset should be deemed as one-year economic drivers for the region. And I want to stress that it's not just the airport, but it's an asset used to attract business to the region. It's kind of that last mile, right? It's how people get into the community as well to do business. So economic development, so the airport, strategic plans that are developed actually speak to how you're going to create jobs on the airport. That connectivity, so again, driving up from Southern Ontario a few times, the connectivity is so critical to do it by air. And so again, for tourism reasons, for conducting business both in and out of the community. The tourism model, so we're seeing a lot of traction on tourist operators working with the airports to try and figure out how do we get somebody from downtown Toronto, for instance, to come to your community for the weekend for that experience. And if you look at, COVID's, God forbid, not going to last forever, people are going to be really looking at what are they going to do to get out of their current situation, to get a break from it. And they're not going to have the comfort level to fly to Mexico right away and can't wait for the day. But so there's a really great opportunity to partner between aviation and the tourist operators to see how you can create those experiences. And also life safety, which is critical with the medevacs and anything to do with those the rescue operations and whatnot is another sideline. But the other three pillars are the critical ones that there's high potential in Fort Erie Airport. I just want to show you a few success stories. Peterborough is a little bit near and dear to my heart, and Lisa's as well, and Zach for that matter. But when I started at Peterborough in 2007, I was a municipal employee that they put the airport on my portfolio. And Peterborough Airport was exactly what Wiarton is today. It had a 5,000-foot runway. It had a few businesses. The GDP wasn't a lot of money. And really, council was asking themselves the same question: what do we do with the airport? The tax the residents are paying to keep the airport open. It's losing money. So what are we going to do with it? And what we did was really looked at the potential. There's 340 acres back in 2007 total, and today there's 885. So similar to Wiarton. And the whole reason for, buying and purchasing the land around the airport was to protect the exposures and the OLS, the tree heights and whatnot, but also to buy more development land because we really saw the potential in creating that as an economic driver. So what has been completed to kind of realize that, and some of it you already have in place, like the land you have, it's making sure there's municipal servicing on it, which it didn't have. Removal of the open air terminal building. So the original building, we removed it so that a developer could come in and build a finishing center for aircraft. And the result today is 280 jobs that they supply on the airport, which didn't exist before. So keeping that open mind, the streamlined building process, if somebody comes in and wants to build a facility on the airport, the engineer stamp drawings, it meets the criteria, they can be building within 60 days. In the aviation world, people aren't going to wait. If it's going to take 2 years to develop, they're going to another airport. So having that streamlined building process is really critical, and that's another key to that success. The city council support, so having council support to say, all right, so if we're going to do this, we're going to have a sound strategic plan, we're going to get behind it, everybody, and we're going to make sure that it becomes the economic driver that we've talked about. So having, it's been four, I think it's on the 5th council now that has put their support behind the airport because of the airport's proving itself. So we conducted a business case, which the first step is what should we invest in, what shouldn't we invest in. We don't want to waste our time, so tell us where the high potentials are. And it's got to be a realistic plan that can be successful and not just a pie in the sky dream sort of deal. So the business plan case was supported in a master plan on how are we going to lay out the airport to ensure that we fulfill those obligations to council that it'll become an economic driver. Ironically, the master plan was a 20-year vision, and at the year in 2017, so it was completed in 2008, 2009. 2017 it had to be updated because we already almost built out the first phase of what was anticipated, and there was more future growth needed and thought needed. So we updated the plan in 17. This is just a shot. Sorry. It's tricky. So you can see the area in the middle that's purple was the original runway, and the expansions were the green off of both ends. And all the areas to the top of the screen, those areas in yellow on the, most of that is all built out now. I'll show you a few pictures, put in perspective. So this is a shot before development. So again, similar to Wyerton, you can see a little short taxiway. You see part of the 5,000-foot runway. It had about 6 private hangars, a little bit of commercial development, kind of again towards the top of the screen, and that's pretty much it. We started development with that sound business plan, and you can see the center campus area that's already has a number of private hangars. And once we, everybody knew we were for business and they were moving into this exciting airport with a 7,000-foot runway and whatnot, that the general aviation area really started to take hold. The commercial area, Flying Colors Corporation that's there today that does aircraft finishing and painting and for the larger aircraft started to expand. So this is the expansion took place in 2010, and you can see 2011 already some progress. This is 2014, so Seneca College were able to secure their aviation program that came out of Buttonville. They brought, by themselves, almost $14 million in GDP a year to the airport, adding 50 employees and 170 students that worked out of there. They paid for $1 million of the crosswind runway. So you get into these kind of partnerships and you start to be able to look at how you can maximize those potentials. This is a shot in 2017, so you can see the area kind of down the lower right. It looks like a cleared area. Again, we were almost out of land on the towards the top of the screen, and so the lower part to the right is the next expansion area. And Flying Colors, again, is expanding, building about 110,000 square feet of building in that area. And already we're starting to push through that area as well. And you can see their buildings in August 2020. So currently today in Peterborough, there's about 550 jobs on the airport we started out with less than 50 to 70 in 2007 between all the businesses combined. And you look at it and you're thinking that's pretty impressive, but how'd you do it? And it was all about having a sound strategic plan that made sense for Peterborough. Every airport is different. You can't do cookie cutter. This is, again, a shot. There's 28 or 29 general aviation hangars, and we separated the general aviation from the center campus, which is the terminal and education center, to the commercial area to the right of the screen. And why is general aviation important? I said it earlier, they're buying fuel, they're buying aircraft parts, they're getting their planes fixed. Many of these hangar owners don't live in the Peterborough area, so we're bringing them from other regions, which is important as well. Up until 2016, so in 8 years, there was $32 million of private money that was invested in the airport to build their facilities. All the land's leased, and they've invested all the businesses in alone. This doesn't include general aviation. $32 million to develop. So how did this come about? First of all, the city decided that they're going to put some money into the project. So to date, they've invested $24 million into the airport. Federal and provincial contributions are $15 million for a total of $39 million. And many of the private businesses have also received grants from the federal government, provincial government for developing their businesses along the way. This is I mentioned the general aviation area is filling up, so this is a shot of the next part of the general aviation expansion, and which is adding 8 more lots, and we already have one of those committed, so it won't be long where we'll have to think about where's next because they're filling up. So today there's about 24 businesses that work on the airport compared to, again, a handful back in 2007. We have shovel-ready land now, so somebody comes in like you do. It wouldn't take a lot to develop some of those opportunities. And we've really started to concentrate on research and development opportunities, educational institutions. We're working with a client now that is developing a research and development facility for ceramics, for instance, that will be used in aircraft engines and that sort of thing. So it's making sure that you're open for business and you have the partnerships. You have the skilled workforce. So this is some of them here that you see that we've been able to partner with. So you just can't wait for the business to come to you. You have to put a solid plan in place and go out and look for it. So just the strategic plan, I'll run through this quick. Just that we updated the plan. We looked at what our role is in the Southern Ontario Airport Network, and I'm one of the founders that really got SOAN off the ground with partnerships with our staff. And what I can tell you is we went to the Paris Air Show after we developed a new airport, and we didn't get one bite. You arrange meetings ahead of time. You're trying to let them know that we're an alternative to some of the GTA airports, and we didn't get a bite. And fast forward to 5 or 6 or 7 years later, and now we're part of the Southern Ontario Airport Network. We went to France last year as part of the delegation that was paid for by Pearson, so we didn't pay a dime to go over, and we came back with 3 really good leads. And as a group of 12 airports in SOAN, there's actually businesses that are now coming to some of these SOAN airports because of it. And so my message here is, I know that Wyerton has tried before to be part of SOAN. If you become a regional airport, then SOAN is going to pay attention, and I believe that we will be successful because now it's that regional model that with a regional plan with your airport. So it's very important for future growth. So we looked at all the development lands. We updated our plan to be between 5 and 20 million. So our GDP for the airport is now, it says 74 million here in 16, but I would hazard a guess that we're well over 100 million now based on the growth at the airport since then. So that's taking what was 30 million up to between 80 and 100 million in about 10 years. So it's possible with a good strategic plan and everybody on the same page on what needs to happen. So in the case of Peterborough, we really looked again, what are the things to concentrate on? The general aviation, the MRO, some of the things I'm suggesting here, the manufacturing, the executive charter markets, and I really believe that that's one area here with tourism, research and development, being an economic driver that we've talked about today. Just move on. So here's some of the I really go through these fast. So our company, we started with 5 employees. We're just shy of 30 now. And in that building, we've attracted Curtis Wright. So the Wright brothers, they do a lot of defense and aerospace work. Fleming has started an aviation program because of their partnerships with the airport. They never would have dreamed about it, but there's a skilled trades were needed. So it's those relationships with your partners in the community that got that going. We have Flying Colors, for instance. They take Bombardier, new green aircraft, new right off the line, and they create these private jets that they end up all over the world. So that was created and homegrown at the airport. Seneca College that I mentioned, 22 aircraft, and state-of-the-art 6 aircraft mechanics. The list goes on and on. Aircraft movements. So in 2007, prior to developing the airport, we did 10,500 movements a year. So that's a takeoff and a landing. And we're averaging around 45 to 48,000 a year now since development. So every time there's a movement on the large aircraft, there's landing fees, there's fuel, there's everything that goes with that. Mix of traffic. So you see it here, similar. So you can see, we're so similar in the, what you guys get in here as well for traffic. So there's such a great mix of traffic that comes in. I'd like to talk about Niagara quickly. So Niagara, we're faced, Niagara District Airport was owned by 3 municipalities. They're faced with the same questions you're asking yourselves today. What do we do with our airport? We can't keep funding our airport alone. It's used by the region. So what Niagara did was they approached the Niagara region itself, and they said, look, you got to get on board here. So after doing some strategic studies and really looking at things, the region voted on taking over the airport. Now the other part that went with this was they also had another airport in their community, which is Welland, and I know Lisa used Welland many times. But they had to really look at being fair to the entire region, right? So they looked at the regional model to decide how are we going to work this. And in the end, I've seen the final report, but I think Welland is more of a small GA airport, and St. Catharines, so Niagara, is more for the jet traffic, and there's the helicopter tours, and all the things that you're seeing here is what they see. So if you think about the regionalization where, for instance, Wyerton could become that hub of an airport for the region, and any other airports can support the general aviation traffic. Or in the case of an airport like Hanover that's further away, if somebody wants to go to Hanover, they'll fly to Hanover. So a study would really look at how to identify that. So as of this year, I believe it is, Niagara District Airport, which was owned by 3 municipalities, will now be shared by all the municipalities. And they're going to go and treat this airport like a regional airport and expand it accordingly based on their opportunities. So Niagara is a really important model to look at to see what they're up to, because it makes a lot of sense. So what why they're wanting to regionalize is transportation for those in the region. So for instance, they have Fly GTA that's very successful from Niagara to Toronto. I think it's a 12-minute flight or something like that, very short, but you can imagine traveling from Niagara to Toronto on a Friday night. So that key transportation is important. Again, an economic driver for the region. Eligibility for ACAPs, when you think about funding and grants for the airport, there is some out there, but one of the most reliable steady ones is ACAP. So ACAP is for airports with scheduled service. So if you get a scheduled service going here and you do so many passengers a year, then you have the opportunity that now your equipment's being bought, your fencing's being paid for, there's the runway rehabilitations. So when you can get to that level, then that's when the government starts kicking in to help support the ongoing operations of the airport. And it's not fair. I strongly believe that the federal government really needs to look at that program, and they've been talking about doing that in the future. But as it currently stands, if you have a scheduled service, then you can be eligible for some of that money. And investment to reach the airport's full potential. They are similar to Wyerton, where they have a lot of room for development and a lot of opportunity. So they really needed that regional approach to be able to get there and not just relying on the taxpayers of a few municipalities. So next one is Lake Simcoe Regional. So again, it's another airport that was owned by City of Barrie, City of Orillia, and Oro-Medonte. When they first partnered, one of them dropped off. I think it was Orillia. But so 3 municipalities are funding an airport with a ton of potential. So in 1993, so it was open in 91, in 93 the runway was extended to 5,000 feet and the airport was officially open. So you've seen a pattern, 5,000 feet. And then in 2011 they extended to 6,000 feet because of the potential the airport had realized. So in so 2008 really left. So same thing. They're going, what's the value to me and to us? We keep putting money in it, and so they pulled out. And in September 2014, the County of Simcoe officially became the newest partner. So that actually is wrong. It was just recently. So now we have the County of Simcoe that owns the airport in partnership with Barrie. Barrie has a small, City of Barrie has a small share in it. But I can tell you that with the county taking over already, they already had plans. They're extending the runway. They're putting the infrastructure in place to be able to compete on that world stage. And they're one of the airports that has seen benefits out of the Paris Air Show, for instance. So their economic development team now from the county is out helping to sell the airport in your community because it's a regional asset. So they're already seeing the benefits of that regionalization. So the other part of this is the county has the resources, so to help with business development activities, that expertise, the economic prosperity. So through economic development, the county already has the mission to create jobs in Simcoe. They enhance transportation options. So now the terminal is not only used as a terminal for air travel, but it's also now a GO terminal that's used so you can park at the airport and you can get on that GO bus where they head into Toronto or wherever. So they're really thinking, what else can we do with our airport? Let's be creative here. So it's, they're very progressive with that. They received, $1.5 million in funding because they went to the government with a sound plan that made sense. There was a regional, project, not just one municipality. In a region, it's that regional model. And now the regions, the government gets on board to say, yeah, what you guys are doing makes sense. We want to be a part of it. So they've been successful in funding, like many of the other airports that have gone down this path. New charter flights planned from the airport. So similar, I spoke earlier at Peterborough, and Wyerton was being looked at prior to COVID. So now these charter flights, you're getting on Wyerton on a Thursday night, you're flying to New York for the weekend, landing back here on Sunday, and you're getting a whole charter experience. Or the other way, that now you're bringing folks in from New York to get the the fall colors tour of the area here. So this is the sort of thinking that's going to make the airport sustainable, is thinking beyond tradition. Region of Waterloo is another example. So in 1996, the region took over the ownership of the airport. In 2000, the 20-year master plan was completed. and there's now 25 businesses similar to Peterborough, and their GDP is about 90 million a year. So they took it from a small general aviation airport, and the region turned it into something. So also it's also operated by the region, but recognizes the strategic economic assets. So same thing, they're in Paris with their economic development team, and they had meetings booked all week because they knew how to navigate the systems of that. Mount Jolie Airport in Quebec. So 1994, the federal government, like many airports, and Martin was no different, when the feds quit running airports or got out of that airport business. So in 2005, Intermunicipal Board was created by the region to look at taking over, and that board now owns the airport. It's one of the largest regional airports in eastern Quebec now. So through great planning and strategic thinking, it's now a regional hub, which is critical. Facilitates business and leisure travel. So with all the stuff we've been talking about tonight, we're focused on active collaboration with regional development initiatives. So, when there's going to be potential business to coming into the community, when the county economic development people know that, now the airport has a seat at the table to say, don't forget, we can get you, in this last mile to your community. So it becomes part of a bigger conversation. Muskoka Airport, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with some of these. But key piece of infrastructure for the district of Muskoka, they decided again, and they continue to really make sure that this is the airport's part of their economic development solutions. So it plays both critical economic and social role in the region. What they see in there is a lot of business. So there's a lot of business, there's a lot of tourism in the industry in the region. So tourism is big. You see again, they get the U.S. travel coming in. And some of the travel where people are leaving their cars at the airport and they fly in, they land and they get in and go. So bringing money to the region. The medical services that we talked about along with Wyerton, agricultural services, so cargo, and forestry monitoring, the firefighting. So again, this is another airport that's owned and operated by the District of Muskoka, and it assumed operation in '96 from Transport Canada. So you see another pattern there. Operate as a municipal function of the district. So everybody probably heard it was in the news that they attracted Porter Air to run flights from Toronto to Muskoka. And in the travel industry and in the aerospace industry, we all said how they do it. And there was many creative things they did to be able to attract them there. And yes, it did cost money to bring Porter in. But there was funding that was attached with it, so it was a great project to be able to bring them in. So again on hold right now, but the airport contributes $40 million to that small region. So you can see there's lots of different models out there. We could have went on and on. There's so many councils that have asked themselves the same question, and so what we felt and what we wanted to put before you tonight was what are the benefits of thinking of your airport as a regional model. So first of all, the transportation, so that facilitation as a transportation offer goods, tourism, business, travel, commercial growth, anything to help move people and goods out of your region. From travel both within and external to the region. So you saw with Fly GTA a little bit, but when somebody can leave here and go to a doctor's appointment in downtown Toronto and get back here the same day for supper, how critical is that? Or somebody can go do business in downtown Toronto, or somebody from Toronto can come and do business here for the day, or come for the weekend. And when we talk about, that the whole scheduled service and that whole service, it's got to be done right, and you got to be with partners that they're going to invest in it, and the airport's going to invest in it and really make it work. It has to be affordable. Nobody's going to get on a plane and spend $600 or $700 to go to fly to Toronto one way. So it's got to be a sound service. For residents and visitors and businesses, the medical services, the enhancing options across the region. I've talked about many of the opportunities tonight. The economic development, so attracting those new businesses to the region. the ability to interact with a larger market. You know, the counties, they have they have more resources and potentially more opportunity. And do they always think about the airport as being part of that package that they're offering to attract somebody there? So it's about being part of that big conversation. Consideration for existing assets. You know, you're already certified. You already have great infrastructure in place at your airport. So what is it going to take to get from here to here? Not as bad as many airports that, you know, are starting from scratch. So you have a lot going for you already. The collaboration with regional development initiatives, and there's many. The economic health, so land assets can be leveraged to support on-site airport-related development and employment opportunities. You've got the land, easy developable, allows for business development opportunities throughout the region. So again, that ease of doing business, and capitalize on future opportunities to drive economic prosperity. So again, it's all, you know, sitting right there. Airport specific, so that increase in air traffic, growth in air traffic. So it's, again, fuel sales, it's, you know, business coming in to establish at the airport, so there's more air traffic, like the flying colors coming in to be able to bring that traffic into the area. You know, ironically, when somebody brings an airplane to flying colors, usually there's a staff member that comes with that lives in Peterborough for 2 years, or however long it takes to get their aircraft finished. When you're talking about an $80 million aircraft being built, they want to have somebody on site. So, and there are those opportunities out there. With passenger increase could allow for the ACAT funding we spoke about, potential charter operations. So same thing, who's going to be comfortable traveling in commercial travel? Well, think of the business folks that don't want to, you know, readily jump on these aircraft. It's going to be more money to fly. It's going to be regional air travel. It's going to be not as easy, not as many flights. So the whole charter operations, you know, chartering the aircraft to do business is going to be something that's going to be growing in the industry. Talked a bit about this. This is the Stewart Travel flights. So some of them, they go to New York, they've gone to Nashville, to Gander, Newfoundland, you know, and these are all 4-day excursions, and they were in talks here, and this was on the list of one of the locations to fly out of. So right now, with a 5,000 runway, pick up partial load, go to another airport like Simcoe or Peterborough and pick up the rest. So those opportunities are out there as well. So here's what we felt your next steps were. Of course, this is only our recommendations, our suggestions, but definitely we wanted to be able to get to the council, and thank you for listening to me tonight. Just to look at, is there interest in, because I know you're asking yourselves the question, what do we do with the report? So is there interest in, you know, an expression of interest by council in looking at what going on to the next steps? And one of the biggest things we recommended was to look at a feasibility study to determine the benefits of the regional model. So a quick study to say, is there, you know, number one, is there an appetite between the councils? And we are visiting Grey and Bruce County councils soon. But is there an appetite to look at making this a regional model? And if there is, then doing a quick study to determine what are the benefits, how would this work when there's more than one airport in the region, what would a governance model look like, and come back to you and say, you know, just before you make any big decisions, here's a study that says here's the potential, and here's a recommendation of what you can do with your airport, so that it's not just Georgian Bluffs that are carrying 100% of an airport that's enjoyed by the region. So, and then after that, if there's an appetite to move forward, it's looking at a business and strategic plan, so and marketing plan. So it's coming up with a sound business plan that's real and not a pipe dream, and then putting plans in place to get this airport up to where its full potential.
Thank you, Trent, for a great presentation. Could we put lights on, please? Cassandra, go ahead.
So before we get into specific questions that council may have for Trent, every time I sit under that thing, it just says. So just to update council on what's occurred a bit more. So this presentation was made to a group of local politicians back in September. And present at that meeting were representatives from the MP, the MPP's office, Grey and Bruce counties. So from that meeting, we, discussed what next steps would be, and it was decided that this presentation needed to happen at the county levels to see if there's any interest from them in making this a regional airport. Because there's no point in doing a study if Grey and Bruce counties aren't on board. So that's next steps. It's already scheduled for Grey County, and I believe that's this week, next week.
Yeah, it's pushed off a few weeks, I think.
So I believe Trent is making this exact presentation at Grey and Bruce counties in November, so we can see if they're interested, in having that regional study done. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense for Georgian Bluffs to have that study done if Grey and Bruce aren't on board. So once we get some feedback from them on that study and whether they're on board with it, we could commence the regionalization study. And we do have some modernization efficiency funding money left. That's a grant we got back in 2019 for $600,000. We still have a good chunk of that money left, that if we proceed with that study, we have that money available. That's all I'm going to say on that for now, and I'll let council ask any questions of Trent or myself, or comment on the idea, of moving forward with the regionalization study.
Thanks, Cassandra. Okay, I'm going to open the floor up to council for questions, and I believe Councilor Coburn, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a couple of questions and perhaps a comment or two as well. Of course, I'm interested in a regional approach to the airport for sure. In regards to the feasibility study, I guess I have a couple of questions. First of all, who is best positioned to conduct that study? I would think we would want someone fairly objective to do that in order for the results to be seen as valid. And I guess I'm going to say I'd be surprised that the counties would express necessarily interest until they've seen the results of the feasibility study. So perhaps Cassandra could fill me in a little more on that, but I think that's probably the information they're looking for in order to make a decision as to whether they want to participate in this as a regional facility.
So Cassie, go ahead.
So if it's decided to move forward with the study, we go out for an RFP. So, qualified consultants throughout Ontario could, submit a proposal for that. And then we could determine which consultant we want to use. You're right in that Grey and Bruce counties probably wouldn't decide that they wanted to move forward as a regional airport without that study. But what I didn't want to do is for Georgian Bluffs Council to spend, $40,000, $50,000 on a study if they have no interest at all. We wanted to get like the feeler out there to see, if the study came back favorably, would they be interested, or are they not even willing to discuss it? I just have a hard time spending that money if, we know one of the parties doesn't even want to consider it.
Good comments. Kathy, go ahead and you get another one.
Yeah, so I think that's fair for sure, Cassie. The other comment I just had, or maybe it's a question, is that if we are going to be moving forward with the feasibility study and that process, I would hope that we do it fairly quickly. I don't want this process to drag on too much longer. We're looking at soon developing our budget for next year, and this could have significant impacts on that. So I'm hoping if we do decide to go ahead with the feasibility study, it's done in a very speedy manner.
Thanks, Councilor Coburn. Cassie, go ahead.
I absolutely agree. I'm just kind of waiting for the presentations to happen at the Bruce and Grey level and, get a bit of a feel for where they're at, and then we could get that study out immediately. What I'm actually thinking too is we can even work on drafting that RFP so that it's ready to go, should we move forward. Steve Furness is on the line from Grey County, and he actually has some comments from Grey County's perspective in relation to that study. So could Steve have a moment to speak, Mr. Mayor?
By all means, go ahead. Steve, you there? Go ahead, Steve.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Certainly at a staff level, and it's been part of our work plans, we're great believers in the potential of the Wiarton International Airport. We think there's a huge benefit, and of course, I think if the benefits are regional, then that only makes sense to manage it that way. We have at a staff level, and I say at a staff level because we haven't presented our budgets to County Council, but we are allocating a portion to put towards that regional study. And I also have, and I won't say where I'm getting it because it's only verbal, but I have some verbal confirmation that we could probably get half that study funded, and we think that would be about $40,000. So, in my opinion, of a $40,000 study, we probably have, notwithstanding we have to make the applications and make the submissions, but likely have 30,000 of it. We do think, I think personally, in the opinion of the consultant we were engaging in before, on the foreign direct investment side through Think Canada, that there is huge potential for the Wiarton Airport. But as Trent said, you have to have a plan, and you have to be able to articulate that plan to investors. So,
Thanks for your comments, Steve. I'm going to open the floor back up to council, and please put your hand up or speak if someone wants to make some other comments or questions. Deputy Mayor Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Trent. Just almost more of a comment maybe than a question, but it's my understanding that part of what's driving these smaller airports out in the periphery to grow larger is Pearson itself is getting overloaded. So they're attempting to push out of there, and that's part of what will help drive things.
Your worship, through you, you're absolutely correct. So Pearson by 2043, right now they see 100,000 passengers a day at peak, not right now of course, but they're reaching capacity and they have no more room to grow. Currently they're allowed so many movements an hour, so they take off the lanes at Pearson as well. They can't grow that anymore. They can't expand into the night. Certain hours it's emergency only. So they're reaching capacity, so they're turning to the other airports in the region, so from Windsor to Kingston, and they're saying, who can help us? And that's the way it started out with Southern Ontario Airport Network. It started out with, how can the region be a relief to Pearson? But what it's going into is that's one part of it, one carrot, if you will. The other side is if there's business wanting to go to Pearson and they don't have the capacity to take the business, they don't want it to leave the area. So they don't want it to go out west or over into the US, or what they're saying is here's 12 or 13 other alternative airports to look at. So, and it's interesting, just quickly, when we started getting together as airports, we're all holding our assets tight in what we thought our potential was, but when we start working through it as a group, we realize that Wiarton has many assets that maybe Peterborough doesn't, or you're in an area that's more attractive than, a Peterborough or a Lake Simcoe or whatever. So now the 12 airport CEOs and managers are all working close together for the common cause. So there's two benefits to the Southern Ontario Airport Network in Pearson. Thank you.
Thanks, Trent. A comment from the chair. On the county level, Grey County, we know we are in, I'll use the term very loosely, a deprived area when it comes to transportation. The corridors coming out of this area are 2-lane, not very good for expansions like that. The county have been pushing very hard to get a transportation corridor started, which they've started with the passenger service and going to Wiarton now, which is great to see that coming. But it wasn't all that long ago that when we talk about transportation, no one ever thought about air traffic. the airports and how important it is to that transportation corridor. And I really think in 2020, we're starting to see where, wow, that is very important to transportation to the Great Bruce area. That's why I think it's so important that we have these conversations with both our partners, Great and Bruce counties, to work with them to show how important this is to the whole region. And for economic development, jobs, everything, it's just so important to do it. Unfortunate thing is, COVID did hit hard with everybody, but maybe there's a real plus out of that. Maybe it gives us an opportunity now to take a deep breath and start again, to really plan. Let's use this as our planning stage now until the COVID thing is done. That's just come with me. Cassie, go ahead.
So another thing I wanted council to keep in mind, and it came up as part of our discussions at that our prior meeting in September. So if council remembers, this summer we contributed money to South Bruce Peninsula for a hotel feasibility study. So we're waiting for the results of that, but I think that could also play into, our airport a little bit. The peninsula is becoming really busy with tourism. And so part of that study was looking at, where do we put all these people that want to come to our area? And that's another kind of tie into the airport that I'm really eager to see what the results of that study were. And probably will reach out to South Bruce and see when they're expecting that report.
Good comments, Cassie, and just to be clear, Jordan Bus and Grey County both put money towards that feasibility study. And so it just goes to show you how Grey County are really thinking how important this whole region is when it comes to economic development. We can't just invite the people here. We have to know what we can do with them when we get them here. That's very important. And we get experts like Steve Furness and Grey County Tourism and Bruce County. They know what to do. We just need to all work together and make it work. Questions, comments from the council members? See that, Cassie? Paul first? Go ahead, Councilor Sullivan.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate that. And I was kind of curious on some of those other airports, and you really explained them well. It's kind of interesting to see how much they grew, and their timeframes were all different when they grew too, as well. Right? Some of them grew a little earlier on. I like what Cassie said about go to the counties and see if there is any interest in a feasibility study before we actually go through it. I do agree that maybe getting the RFP ready so it is ready to go as soon as possible. So I just going to want to make that note just so that if we're going to vote on that or something like that. Just curious on or how that would just direction.
Not at this time,
No, you don't need to vote on that. What we can do is I'll get it ready and then I'll bring a report back to council letting you know how those discussions went at the county levels and then let you know if I'm issuing that or not, if that works. So the main thing about tonight for me anyway was to, make sure that council was on board with what staff has been working on, i.e. making these presentations at the county level and seeing if there's support there because at our last budget meeting back in 2020, to me, it seemed pretty clear that our goal was to move this forward as a regional airport. And I'm seeing heads nodded that that's still council's goal and, that we're kind of taking the right steps to see if that's a possibility.
Okay, good comment. As part of our agenda here tonight which was very important, is to have a public meeting. And we tried to schedule one before, long the time frame before COVID came in and stopped everything. But that is part of our discussion a little bit later on our agenda to talk about a public meeting. Cassie?
Yes, so that's next steps as well, is we'd like to host that public meeting that we had originally planned for back in March, to kind of gauge the public's interest in this. So, one of the discussions at that public meeting would be moving this to a regional airport. We had a lot of submissions around budget time from the public with concerns and about the airport and support too. So I think it's important to have that meeting still to get public feedback, because we have promised ratepayers that meeting would occur. So if council doesn't have any more questions for Trent or myself, we can move on to that portion of the agenda where we discuss a date. Britt and I do have a date in mind. So if we throw them out there, you let us know. And this is the meeting that will be advertised to the public.
And to Kat, I just want to be very clear, when this public meeting, it's just not for ratepayers of North Bluffs. It's a public meeting for anyone, everybody.
Yes.
Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, for businesses, ratepayers, interested parties in the airport, I guess, is instead of saying ratepayers, we can say interested parties in the
Exactly.
airport.
Good, okay. Now, before we move on to that, I'll open the floor one last time to council members if they want to make any other comments. If I see none, we will move on to our agenda. Okay, first of all, we're down, the next thing on our public is our public question period. Madam Clerk, did we receive any comments from the public?
We did not.
Thank you. So move on. We're down to unfinished business. Our unfinished business is a discussion regarding scheduling a public meeting to consider the Wharton Kelvin International Airport update. Do I turn the floor over to Cassie or Brittany? Brittany, go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, just because I have the microphone. So Cassie and I have checked both the council and committee calendar as well as our respective calendars and have come up with 2 dates for consideration of council. The first being November 24th and the second being December 1st. Both dates, the meeting would commence at 5 o'clock as a normal council meeting would. So before we get into kind of the logistics of hosting this meeting, do either of those 2 dates stick out as being better or worse for any of
Can
you?
you tell us what day they are?
They are both Tuesdays to
Tuesdays.
avoid conflicts with other meetings as well as county council.
See the 24th and 1st.
Correct.
Brittany, you asking if
What
that meets
was the
council's
second date,
proposal?
November?
You're asking?
What was the
Go ahead,
second
Ryan.
date? November the what?
November the 24th.
And what was the first date?
So we have 2 dates in mind, Tuesday, November 24th at 5 o'clock, or Tuesday, December 1st at 5 o'clock.
So I'll be away for the second week. I'm okay for the first, November 24th.
Councillor Coburn, do you have a preference?
I can make either of those dates, Brittany.
Okay, let's go to Council Pringle.
No, I'm good with either, doesn't matter.
Chief Deputy Mayor.
I'm good with either one.
Council Barfoot.
Okay, my name.
Thank you. Council Sullivan.
Looks good to me.
And it looks good to me too. Brittany, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So to accommodate Councillor Thompson, let's set it for November 24th, Tuesday, November 24th at 5 o'clock.
And where might this be taking place?
So that's another thing that we have to consider.
Cass,
I'm gonna pass it over to
Cassandra,
Cassie.
go ahead.
So obviously, everything is subject to COVID. So, if we want to, the preferred choice would be to have the public participate virtually. But if we want to be able to accommodate, some in person, then we need to pivot to Shell Lake and hire a company to help us live stream there. We don't have the technology there. If we do 100% virtual participation, we can do it in the council chambers. So I guess it's dependent if you want to accommodate potential in person, but again, if COVID says no more gatherings, then that's shut down anyway. So, Fred has a comment.
Madam Clerk.
So Councillor Coburn, I can see that your hand is raised. Just one comment. If we have people, if we limit it to just strictly virtual participation, people have the option to call in by telephone as well as video participate. So if someone doesn't have a computer and they still wish to participate, and we are limited to virtual means, so long as they have a telephone, they are still able to voice their opinions.
And we've already done that process with the public meeting, worked very good.
That's correct. We did do a strictly virtual participation for the Wilson Drive public meeting, and we did receive a lot of positive feedback about it. Those are my comments. And
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think likely at this point in time, we're looking at virtual attendance just to be prudent about safety, health and safety. I would, Mr. Mayor, also like to make a recommendation, though, that rather than expecting that everyone can be free during that time, I would recommend that we put a survey link out there so that people can answer some survey questions, ask if they're in support of it or not, and perhaps provide some feedback that way as well. I think that just reaches more people, and it does open up the time frame for people to be able to respond with comments.
Good comment, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Coburn. A survey is definitely doable, but as always, people have the ability to submit written correspondence for consideration of council that would be considered comments that we would include in the agenda and or read aloud if they requested to do so. And we would give people plenty of time to submit that correspondence. So now that we have a date set, we could commence advertising as soon as possible. So everyone knows that if they don't wish to participate virtually, they have a month or so to submit their comments.
Thank you, Brittany. So go ahead, Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only other thing that I would like to recommend is that we do a press release for the newspaper and radio. I think if we're expecting people to see that this is happening by looking at our website, that might be a little naive. I'd like to be able to get the word out far and wide so that people feel that they've been given adequate notice.
Good comment. I see everybody's head nodding. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, and again, thank you, Councillor Coburn. It's definitely our intention to put advertisements both on the radio, on our website, as well as in the local newspapers, being the Wyerton Echo, as well as the Owen Sound Sun-Times. And I would do so at least twice, have at least 2 articles in the newspaper about it.
Thanks, Brittany. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
I would suggest plus social media to ensure it gets a little further. Yeah.
For yes, of course, social media as well. We'll continue to push it throughout the month on a regular basis, but we'll of course circulate to all of the appropriate news outlets.
Okay, thank you. Just to sum it up, the Drexen Council are giving to staff are to arrange a public meeting November 24th at 5 o'clock. That's a Tuesday, and start and proceed with necessary advertisements of this event, just the way you outlined printing, media, and everything else, and to give everyone plenty of opportunity to comment either by written form or make it very clear it's going to be a virtual meeting so everybody understands what the process is. Madam Treasurer.
In the meantime, while advertising, staff will be working on an agenda for that meeting. And so I know back in March, some of you provided requests of information you'd like to see at that public meeting. I know that you'd like to see the financials for the airport for the last several years, so we will have those there. But if there's any other information you'd like to see, please let us know as far in advance as you can so that we can work on getting that pulled together.
Okay, thanks, Cassie. Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I keep forgetting that. Just because there are a lot of people in the rural areas that may not have computers, could you print up some kind of posters and I'll drop them off at the post office in Kimball and in Shallow Lake and out in the outlying areas?
So typically what we've been doing and has been worked really well is we've been reaching out to our vendors that sell bag tags in our community, and we can see if they'd be willing to put a poster up in their location to advertise the meeting as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So I think it's a great step in the right direction. I think staff have got your marching orders, what council is directing you to do. Does council have any other comments to do with this staff instruction? Deputy Mayor Carlton?
Just a question as to what we plan to have for a presentation. Are we sharing Trent's presentation or what is staff's plan for that?
Please leave it with staff. We're gonna have a discussion on Thursday of what, we feel needs to be presented at that meeting. But this was just decided tonight, so we don't have a definite plan at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks. I see Trent and his team's head nodding up and down, so there's help there too. He's nodding off. Okay, I think we pretty well gone through our agenda then, and it's great that we are moving forward. I have a recommendation here. Unfinished business, I have a recommendation here, the bylaw 2020-114 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on October 20th, 2020 be read a first, second time, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed the corporation of drawers in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Sutherland, second by Councillor Thompson. If there's no discussion, all in favor of the motion? Is carried. So we are down to, just so council knows, the next council meeting is October 21st. We'll go ahead, Councillor Burford.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. One concern that I have, and I don't know how we can overcome this, is it could be conceived to be a conflict of interest to have the company do the public meeting saying, well, yeah, you have a conflict of interest because you're under contract to the municipality. You're not a independent third party. That's just a concern.
Okay, Cassie, go ahead.
So staff will be pulling the documentation needed for this meeting. Leave it with me. We may be including the slides from tonight, but those are public as it was held at a public meeting. But yes, staff will be the ones presenting the information.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that while you may be correct, Councillor Barfoot, that there may be a perceived conflict of interest should Lumex host the meeting, it is definitely not our intention to have Lumex host the meeting. It is the township's public meeting. It is for the township's residents. So staff of the municipality and council will be hosting the meeting, not Lumex.
It's for the ratepayers of River Plus and everyone else.
Sorry, yes, and the surrounding area.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Barfoot?
Thank you, Brittany. I'm glad you clarified that. Which brings up a point that was made earlier that when the notices go out, it was going to be interested in the airport. No, when the notices go out, it should be the ratepayers of Georgian Law, period. Anybody can attend it. And it's, word it that even if they're not interested in the airport, they can come to the meeting.
Yeah, we'll be fairly general in the news article and not specify on any grouping.
Yeah.
Just a notice of a public meeting to consider the airport.
That's great. Okay. Well, it's great. We had a great discussion. And again, thanks Trent and your team for a great presentation here tonight. We appreciate it. Safe fly home. So I need one more motion. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Pringle. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? It is carried. We are now adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.